Okay. And can you put me on gallery view so I can see lots of people? Wow, 24. Great. So people are still coming back from the groups. Okay. Hello. We'll just wait while the last few people come back from their groups, and we'll start. Good. Okay. Just waiting for Sadaloka.
Just left my group.
Who's just left his group in his room. Come over to the shrine room to join us. We've got Caroline on keyboards and tech this afternoon. So first time on this retreat. That's very nice. And I haven't had a chance to follow it, but I assume we've got 5 new order members by now. So that's 21 new order members in the course of this retreat. So that's quite a good haul that we've produced. It's the Bodhicitta, yeah, works every time. Okay, so in the last session, we were looking at that series of reflections. All beings are essentially like oneself. Yeah, we all want to be happy. We all don't want to suffer. But we look in the wrong place. We don't understand how to do that really. So although we're constantly, moment by moment, actually kind of monitoring our environment and adjusting and seizing opportunities and avoiding things, even with all that going on, we never really manage it, for here and there to some degree. But that real security, that real happiness, that real freedom, we never get to. And that's mainly because we're looking in the wrong place, in the wrong way. Yeah, because me trying to be happy is doomed to failure from the start, because it's all based on the assumption of a real me, that somehow at the center of our experience, behind our experience, the one who has the experience, trying to make ourselves happy. And when we look and really explore, we don't find that. We don't find that. And it's also based on the assumption that there's me in here and there's everyone else and everything else out there. Yeah, so when we see things like that, we're outnumbered by 7 billion and something to 1. So attaining happiness is difficult. Yeah, so we started from the wrong basis. So, and because of that, like prisoners unable to escape from prison, from jail, because of our own lack of understanding, our own avidya, we all revolve endlessly in samsara. What a total tragedy. So that's where we ended on that cheerful note. That's where we ended the last session. So this afternoon, we'll look at the 4th section, and we'll see there may not be a lot to say about it, although if there is, I'm sure I'll find it. I usually do. And if there's time, I'm still getting questions in, so I'd like to see if I can get to 1 or 2 of those, and make sure that we also get to meditate for a while. So that's the plan. So on to section 4. One reflects on the painful futility, the wastedness of this, the the uselessness of this situation, the sadness of it, making a strong resolve to lead all beings from this endless suffering, but realizing that one can only help others fully by escaping from samsara oneself. And we remember samsara isn't a place. It's not like, sort of beam me up, Scotty, out of this particular world or realm. Samsara is the way in which we're using our minds, the way in which we're interpreting all our experience. By escaping from samsara itself, one therefore resolves to go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until one has attained complete liberation, taking all beings with one. And then Parami adds in, if it's helpful, one can call to mind someone one knows who's currently suffering. This is often more immediate, and one can move from this to reflect that all beings suffer. And to me, actually, that should go earlier in the practice. It's sort of more connected with the reflections on suffering. I haven't had a chance to talk to Parami about that. So we see this situation, all beings are suffering, and in a sense, it's unnecessary. In a sense, if we could just clear the veils, clear the dust from our eyes, see things how they really are, then certainly that deep level of dukkha would disappear. So we make a strong resolve. And that strong resolve really has to come from the core of our being. It really has to be kind of forged in that furnace of our heart wish for beings to be free, or for them to wake up, or for them to really experience love, compassion, and so on. Whatever it is that really drives us. That's what will forge that strong resolve. Along with a sense of who we're practicing with, that resolve that we make is adding on, is the next link in the chain, it's the next addition in a great lineage of people who have all made that resolve. In a way, starting with the Buddha, when he decides that he'll go and teach, and he spends the rest of his life going from place to place, teaching the Dharma. So we make that strong resolve. But realizing that we can only help others fully by escaping from samsara ourselves, we resolve to go for refuge. So we can only help others fully by escaping from samsara ourselves. Otherwise, it's the blind leading the blind. Or somebody in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, according to the phrase. So the more clearly we see things, the more we've experienced the path, the more we've found ways of working with our difficulties and finding a way through, the more deeply we're in touch with the lineage of awakening, the more help we can be, the more benefit we can be. And traditionally, there are three approaches to bodhicitta in this way. There's what's called the way of practice of the monarch, the way of practice of a boatman or boat person, and the way of practice of a shepherd. So in those three ways of practice, in the first one, the ruler, the king, the queen, whoever it is, at least in ancient India, the ruler would would make sure that all their needs were met. And then out of the abundance of the royal treasury and so on, they would make sure their subjects were cared for as well, as best they could. So you can take the approach, okay, well, I'll really put energy into freeing myself, and then I'll really be in a position to help others, rather than, yes, okay, being a little bit further down the path than them, and then trying to take on that responsibility, but not really fully having the resources. So that's one way that traditionally it's talked about. Then there's the way of somebody who's ferrying others across. They take everyone with them, but they're in the boat, they're in the ferry. Yeah, so you go across together. And then the third one is the way of the shepherd, and the shepherd gets their animals and drives them before them. So there's, in the way of approach of this, yes, that's where you get this sort of idea that I think mainly comes from Far Eastern Buddhism, that the Bodhisattva puts off somehow their awakening. I'm not quite sure how that happens. I think this is more so poetic than literal. They put off their awakening until all other beings are awakened. I think being a shepherd on the Bodhisattva path with living beings is definitely shepherding cats. In fact, big cats, it's shepherding pumas and tigers. But the Bodhisattva will do anything for living beings. So there it is. Yeah, so you can also, these three ways, they correspond to practices like giving. So you can practice giving. Okay, you make sure that you have what you need and you're comfortable, and then you've got some money in the bank that you don't need, and so you give that away. That would be a start. And then there would be the approach where you and someone else that you're concerned with, or some people that you're concerned with, you pool your resources or you share. So you don't prioritize yourself. Yeah, it's us. It's us together. And actually, the whole Bodhisattva path involves moving from I and me and mine to we and us and ours. That's a really major and helpful step. The more we can see things in those terms, the more we should be on the path. And then you can take the viewpoint of the shepherd, where first off you think of someone else or a number of other people, and you make sure that their needs are met, and then you live off whatever's left. So any of those positions are possible, and as your heart opens more and more, the tendency will be to become looser and freer and less concerned about, do I needing this and I'd like that, and your wants and needs sort of get less, and you're more concerned with your spiritual friends, with this person, with that situation that you want to help. And then you get to the point where really you're not too concerned with yourself at all. You just really want to make sure that those people and that situation are all right. So maybe this is a good point to remind you that this is a dharna retreat. And anything that you can give, whether from the point of view of a ruler or a ferry person or a shepherd, would really help greatly with Adhisthana, who are set to lose a tremendous amount of money this year. And although Adhisthana looks very solid and secure, and there's all these buildings and people, actually, as we know in samsara, things come apart if the conditions aren't there for them to continue. And Yeah, so it would be really good. I know a lot of you have already given, but if you could at some point. And please don't be like me. I mean, often what I do is there's a Dharma appeal and I'm moved and I think, oh yes, I will give. Oh, but I'm a bit busy now. And then it keeps coming back to me. I think, oh yeah, I will do it. But because I don't actually make it specific, I don't think, right, I'm going to do it at 6 o'clock this afternoon. And I don't really kind of ever quite get clear about what it is I'm going to give. And I sort of swing around between a larger figure and a lesser figure. And somehow I don't quite get around to deciding. The whole thing stays vague. And then after the event, I get an email and I think, oh yes, I really do want to give. But how much? And I don't, and I've got to go out now. And then, the email goes down and down and down in my inbox until it sort of disappears from view. And I haven't done it. And this does happen to me sometimes. So it would be great if it didn't happen to you. Yes. So please don't be like me. Make it specific, make it clear, and just do it. Because when I do that, I know how my heart appreciates the fact that I have. Okay. Yeah, so we make a strong resolve to lead all beings from this endless suffering. But realizing that one can only help others fully by escaping from samsara oneself. And this morning, I was talking a bit about, well, actually, what I was talking about was renunciation, partly. If you really see the faults of that whole way in which our minds habitually function, if you really see not only that they're creating suffering, but that it can never work, it can never ever work. And if you also see that mundane life on its own level can never give security and never be fulfilling, then there's a disengagement. Yeah, you start to withdraw energy from it. You stop being interested in functioning like that. But I tend not to talk much about renunciation. I mean, renunciation and rebirth seem to be the two forgotten concepts of a lot of Western Buddhism. But whether we think in those terms or not, we need to be withdrawing energy from what isn't going to fully satisfy us and putting energy into the noble quest. And if we don't do that, not only is still a lot of our energy involved with the ignoble quest, looking in the wrong place for happiness, but also we're going to have unrealistic expectations of everyday life. And so when something bad happens, difficult happens, whether it's to us or other people, we're going to feel that shouldn't be happening, that it's wrong that that's happening. And so there's a kind of emotional resistance to engaging with it, because our first response is, oh no, this shouldn't be happening at all. And that it takes a while to get through that, to feel, well, yes, but actually it is happening. And yeah, we just need to engage with it. Yeah. So when everyday life goes wrong, somebody falls sick, or something happens, there's a disaster, there's a terrorist incident, whatever it is, if because of our view of life, our first response is that we argue with the facts and feel, no, this can't be happening, this shouldn't be happening. All that energy that should kind of would naturally go into responding, takes a while to get through. Takes a while to really kind of push through that sort of resistance which is coming from our view of life. So we need to keep adjusting our view of life to make sure that it really is realistic. Because again, what's around us a lot of the time are sort of views of life where everything's going to progress and things are going to get better. And if somebody gets ill or sick, that shouldn't have happened, and so on. And it's not that we don't do what we can do about things, but we need to really stand on the Dharma in this way. Okay, one therefore resolves to go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until one has attained complete liberation, taking all beings with one. And I know for some people, from some of the comments and questions I've had, that this area is a bit problematic. And it depends on your approach to the practice as a whole, whether this sits easy with you or whether it's a bit difficult. So if you have quite a strong sense that you're taking responsibility for your own going for refuge, and for leading others who are all in suffering, leading them all or helping them all on the path, then this probably will be okay. But there are different ways, as we know, that you can do the practice. And one way in which some people do the practice is that right from the beginning, there's a sense that we're not just doing the practice by ourselves. It's a bit like following on from the going for refuge and prostration. You have all beings around you when you do that practice, and you've got your father and all men and your mother and all women, and they're all going for refuge. So one way of doing the Bodhicitta practice is that right from the beginning, when the refuge appears, there's a sense of all beings there with you, kind of going for refuge, and it's a sense of the whole order, perhaps, all practicing together. And so it feels like there's a collective movement of bodhicitta. So that feels okay until you're kind of asked to resolve to go for refuge, taking all beings with one, because then it feels like now it's sort of down to me again, and all those beings are suffering, and there has to be a sort of like change of vision at that point of the practice. So some people find that difficult. Or if you've been very much practicing in terms of self-surrender and just opening to the refuge and letting the refuge do the practice, and you just be a channel for bodhicitta, just be a channel for blessings, then again, it can feel like, yes, every day me had kind of got out of the way and there was just the refuges doing the practice. But now I'm asked to, sort of come back to a sense of me as a sort of superhero, sort of rescuing all beings. And again, that can feel a bit jarring at that point. And it's not that there are a number of valid ways of doing the practice. It's a bit like, I studied literature at university, and I like to watch different productions of Shakespeare plays. And it's amazing, just how one play can be interpreted by different directors in so many different ways. And quite a lot of those interpretations, they work well for this part of the play, but then they don't work so well for that part. You see one character like this, and that works really well in Act 2, but then when they do that in Act 4, it doesn't really work so well. So it can be a bit the same with this. So it's not that, there are a number of different ways that you can practice, and depending on which approach you take, whether you take more of a self-development or a self-surrender or a self-discovery approach, certain little bits of the practice you may bump into and feel like, oh, that doesn't square with how I'm seeing it. And that's okay, as Bhante said, and what's important is the principle, fundamentally. So if you find that there's an approach to the practice as a whole that really works for you, but then it doesn't work, to think in a way that a particular sentence is asking you to think, well, okay, don't make that into a problem. Just acknowledge, okay, that's just coming at things in another way, which could be helpful for other people. It could be helpful for me at certain time. Okay. So the main thing is that however we practice, there's this very strong sense of opening to the refuge, opening to awakening, knowing that that is actually the true security, the true source of what's going to satisfy our heart, satisfy our longing for freedom and love and wisdom and so on, and that all other beings are like us, and we're not finally separate from them, and we're going to do everything we can to help, support, set up conditions for them to find that freedom as well. Okay, so let's just take a few minutes to do a few questions. There are one or two that are left over from earlier, so this might be a little bit miscellaneous, but won't do many. So one says, when I've done the Bodhicitta practice in the past, it's been very helpful to visualize Padmasambhava, who's presumably this person's yidam, within me rather than externally. This way, the dark shadow seems purified more fully into moonbeams, and I don't get overwhelmed. Is this as valuable an approach as visualizing externally? Is it better to try to move towards external visualization? Are there any other pointers and things to remember whilst visualizing the image of enlightenment internally? Yeah, this is one of these really good ways of practicing, one of the approaches that we can take. This is that sort of self-development approach where the qualities of awakening we're starting to bring home to our heart. And so if that's the natural way for you to practice, it's not that that's inferior in any way to seeing the refuge out there. In fact, if you look at the development of visualization practices in Buddhist history, which probably to some degree parallels natural developments in how individuals will tend to practice, then the practices started with devotion to the Buddha out there, and the Buddha then became the archetypal Buddha, but still seen externally. And then as time went on, visualizations became visualizations with awakening in some form in your heart, and then self-visualizations where you yourself were the awakened being. So yeah, this way of practicing is fine. And if it suits who you are, it's great. and no need to sort of move the source of the qualities back out in front of you. Although actually locating the qualities anywhere finally is wrong. And whichever way you practice, there are things that you learn. So when the refuge is in front, all visualizations, they're all actually related to everyday life. So when the visualization is in front, you're learning more about a particular way of relating to others, relating to the world. You're practicing within that sort of dynamic. So there are certainly things to learn from having the figure in front, but it's not superior to having it in your heart. That'll do for that one. Hopefully the questioner agrees with me that that will do for that one. I had a very little practical one. Could you please elaborate on what you mean by the phrase "open up the spine" that you've used a few times when we're setting up to meditate? Well, all I mean by that is that with your meditation posture, it's good if the crown of the head is kind of, it's almost like you imagine it's sort of attached to a balloon or something. So there's a lifting of the crown of the head, and to some degree, there's an extension of the spine. And yes, what we don't want is the spine kind of cramped and the vertebrae kind of cramped. So we want some sense of that movement, and we can feel it sort of to some degree physically, and it corresponds to an energetic movement up the spine. And we can help that with a sort of imaginative feeling that there is space between the vertebrae. So that's all I meant by that. So I've used that a few times when we're setting up to meditate. Actually, for me, the meditation starts the moment I just stop. the moment that we go into what we call just sitting, but we're not even doing just sitting at that point. Right at the beginning. For me, that's the beginning of the meditation. And I know what the questioner means, because posture is part of what we think of as setup. But I find, from there and the grounding and all those things, for me, they're an integral part of the meditation, actually. Mm-hmm. We've got quite a long question about the importance of connecting with and honouring what the questioner calls a vast and broad and exponential lineage, and loyalty as a vital aspect of the refuge. I won't read the whole question because it's quite long, but it's the questioner goes on to talk about how in a lot of Tibetan Buddhism, there's a very strong sense of lineage and connectedness with that. And I've been trying to move us into that territory with that question, who are you practicing with? And we saw, well, the answer can be all of us on the retreat. It can be the whole order that we're part of. It could be the whole of Triratna. It can be all those Buddhists who are really practicing around the world. It can be all those who've got really good hearts and are looking to be of help and benefit to the world. But we're not even limited by time and space. So it can be all those figures in the refuge tree, and not limited to them. It can be all those who've been open-hearted, who've followed the Bodhisattva path. It can be any teachers of the past. We're practicing with them, all of those. We don't realize it because we're so sort of time-bound, but we can open up into a vision where those figures on the refuge tree, for instance, from Bhante to the Buddha, any or all of those figures could become really sort of living forces in our practice. If we were to take any one of them and just really focus and keep connecting with them day after day after day, there would come a point where it would feel as if, well, we were really in contact with them. And we don't, we can't ever prove whether we're in contact with Milarepa out there, so to speak, or whether we're in touch with Milarepa in here, but it doesn't actually matter. The point is that we can derive inspiration and energy and what we call blessing from any figure, any bodhisattva figure, any awakened figure. We really aren't limited by time and space as in the way we think we are. I often quote Bhante in the Duties of Brotherhood in Islam seminar, where he's asked whether it's worth doing metta for people who've died. And he says, yeah, definitely. And don't be surprised if you feel a response. So, if we were to really focus on the teachers of the present or the teachers of the past, or any awakened, realized, or deeply practicing figure, at a certain point, if our practice went deep enough, we would feel a response. So, I think the more we can have that sense of sitting with the support of all those on the Bodhisattva path, all those teachers who taught their disciples in the hope that the Dharma would keep rolling along down over the centuries to us, the better. It can be such a source of support and inspiration. And again, it takes us right out of our little box on the screen. It's so easy to end up thinking, well, it's just me sitting here in my bedroom doing my practice. When actually, it needn't be like that. We could have huge support and sources of inspiration that we could draw. So it's people practice in different ways, and the questioner ends up asking whether I think that in the order we do have that sense of vast, broad, and exponential lineage. And I'm not going to try and answer for 2,300 of us, but certainly the more we do, the easier and happier and more fulfilling the practice will be for us. All right, so enough words for one afternoon. So this evening, in the next session, session 4, we'll have another guided development of bodhicitta. I think in the program at the beginning of the retreat, it said there would be devotional practice, and actually there's been just guided meditation pretty much. But hopefully the guided meditation is a devotional practice. And this evening I'll do it more from that point of view of self-discovery, more with the refuge within rather than in front of us, just to give us more of a taste of that approach. Okay, so let's do a short guided meditation to finish with. Tomorrow, day 5, we'll get into Tonglen, giving and receiving. So the meditation starts now. So nothing to do, not asking anything of ourselves, not even that we be relaxed. Our mind doesn't have to go quiet. Just aware of these moments. Now touching the earth, feeling our connection with the ground. Feeling, imagining awareness and energy going down into the earth. And out of that stable foundation, letting the upper body be light, bringing awareness into the body. As much as possible, letting the body be a field of kindly awareness. And whatever arises in that field is cared for, and then transforms into the next experience, which is cared for. As naturally as possible. Now extending that field of care beyond physical sensations and feelings, letting it include the whole of our being. Whatever emotions there are, whatever stories, words, images, movements of energy, anything which gives us a sense of me. It's all just embraced in this field of loving kindness. Everything can appear, be cared for, and transform into the next experience. Now, if it feels right to us, widening out that field of love and kindness and care, including every one of us meditating together. Now in experience, we might have images of different people, thoughts of them, a sense of them, kind of felt sense of us all in our different places, but all linked in the meditation. Whatever experience we have, it's all held with love and care. We're all part of one meditation. All sharing and receiving energy. All part of one field of loving kindness. And if we want, for the last few minutes of the meditation, we could also open to the fact that our meditation is a continuation, is part of the meditation of so many other beings, so many other practitioners of Bodhicitta. There's one meditation that's been going on for at least 2,500 years. We've joined it. May it never stop. When we're ready, once again, nothing to do. Just aware experience. And sharing the benefits of the practice with all beings. May they all join this great meditation. May they all add their energy to this field of loving kindness. Okay, I'll see some of you in a couple of hours' time for Bodhicitta practice. And go well until then.